Hey, all you Ethicuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, what the heck's the matter with you? Welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think that we can fix our world by fixing our workplaces, I got a real treat for you today. We got the one and only Deb Sabatini-Henley. So we're getting smashed over here in North Carolina with Hurricane Debbie, but we got the real Debbie here today. How's it going, Deb?
Fine, thanks. Know how many of those texts I've had in the last 3 days?
Well, guess what? Hopefully you get a bunch more, okay? So today we're going to be talking about resilience strategies for ethics and compliance in HR. So many of us who are guardians in our organization, we kind of carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, and we spend so much time focusing on the people around us that sometimes we don't take care of ourselves, and it's so easy to get burned out. So we're going to dive into that today. I know I say this every week. Hit this survey. The feedback we've been getting is great. Any more feedback you can give us on how we can make this more valuable, the things you like that we could double down on, the things that you would like us to delete, please share those thoughts. This is for you. This is for us. This is our space every single week to connect and remind ourselves, you know, what matters most. So we take very seriously this time that you spend with us each week. And if you're not sharpening your sword or sharpening your saw or getting smarter and changing your mindset, then you're leaving a lot of influence and a lot of impact on the table. So there is a whole bunch of great thought leadership that's coming out in this space. Here are some of my favorite podcasts. Here are some of our favorite books in the Ethicsverse or the Ethico library. So if you're interested in checking any of those out, I would tell you to hit this QR code here, and you can see all the stuff that's in the library. They got links to the Amazon pages. And as always, you know, we love giving away books. We don't even like making money around here. We just like giving away books. So we're going to be giving away some great books today, which I'll get to in one quick sec. The FCPA Survival Guide. This is an award-winning, highly rated by my mom. She thinks it's the best podcast she's ever heard. Award-winning podcast with me and Tom Fox talking through the FCPA Survival Guide. It's a 10-part series. You could 2x each episode in about 5 minutes. It's been getting a lot of great reviews from my mother. So if you're like her, you'll love it. So check that out. The Ethico ecosystem is off the charts. So if you're interested in seeing how a next-gen tool, something that's been updated in this decade, can help to increase your participation in your program, help you focus on some risks a little bit better, and stop typing things from one system into the other. You can check this out, a nice no pitch zone style demo. And of course, we still got the free year of service, but it's only for Ethicsverse members. So we've shut that down to the general public, and we're just giving it to all you Ethicuties, okay? So book of the day, Deb wrote this book, Presence in Chaos. It's a phenomenal book. We're giving away 5 of them today. So I think you guys will like it a lot. It's got a lot of great quotes. It's very emotional, you know? So we're giving away 5 of those today for those of you who have the best comments, the best questions. We want to always keep this very organic, and we want this to serve you. Usually a topic like this gets a lot of great attention, and there's a lot of great tactics that you all have probably developed in your own lives. So share those things and jump on in and get a book. Hi, I'm Nick. I am a very good bad boy, or a very bad good boy. I don't know. How's it going? Chief Servant of Ethico, and the one and only Deborah Sabatini-Henley. You know, Deb had a dream after the moon landing to become an astronaut. So we're making that dream a reality today. How's it going, Deb?
Fine, thanks. I'll bet a lot of people weren't even alive in 1968 yet, but I was. And I thought a girl should go to the moon. So now you've made my dream come true.
Who loves you, huh?
Yeah.
So Deb is the founder and president of Resility. And today we're going to be going through this presentation, Burnout and Resilience in the Ethics and Compliance in HR Profession. So Deb, why don't you tell us a little bit about Resility? And also I'd love to talk about this event you have coming up, because it looks to be really good.
Sure. Well, first, before I tell you about Resility, in addition to my book, there are 3 articles in Harvard Business Review that I co-authored that I think are also quite relevant to not just today's topic, but to what we do in ethics and compliance in HR. So they're there, and I think we can put the links in the chat, because there is actually a website for my Presence in Chaos book that can show you some of the pages in it. So if you're not one of the lucky 5, you can still see what I did there. Resility is the successor to the consulting firm I started actually 20 years ago called Compliance and Ethics Solutions. And over the course of my career, about 15 of the last 30 years, I've been in-house doing ethics and compliance. I started in 1994 So, before Enron, before anybody could spell compliance. And my focus was very nuts and bolts, risk assessments, policies, procedures, compliance training, codes of conduct, and so forth. And what I learned several years into my corporate experience was that no matter how good my codes and policies and training were, if I hadn't engaged champions in the leadership of the company, it really didn't matter how great my stuff was. I could tell you tons of stories where I was doing a compliance training session or I was rolling out a code of conduct. And because I hadn't spent the time to engage the leader of the business unit or the CEO, my training was sort of backed over with the CEO's bus when, leaders would say things like, get out there and make the numbers, whatever you got to do. And I might have just spent an hour talking about what not to do. So the shift that I made, I guess about 7 or 8 years ago, or maybe more, was to focus on culture and leadership so that all of you out there can work with me, can work with others, so that you can then pivot to work with the leaders and the employees in your organizations to build cultures of speaking up, to build cultures that embrace the idea of doing the right thing, being good for business. And here's a list of some of the offerings that we share, but there's more on the Resility.com website if you're interested. I really, I told Nick the other day, I turned 64 2 weeks ago, and I really want to spend the rest of my career helping my peers in this profession be more effective, be more resilient, and do what they need to do to make their training come to life, to make their codes come to life, and also to not just survive in this profession, but also to thrive. And so part of that is learning how to find equilibrium, learning how to juggle lots of things while wearing lots of hats and not burning out. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Why don't we tell them about your event, though, real quick?
Sure. Okay.
You want to do that now or later?
No, I can do that.
So if you guys
now.
don't know Deb, you are going to absolutely love her. She's one of my favorite people ever. And this is going to be so good.
Thank you.
Tell us about September 12th, Deb.
Sure. So I've got here on the screen actually two things. September 12th and 13th is a strategic leadership and resilience summit that we're doing. This is actually something I started doing in 2021. I think that might be when I met you, Nick. During COVID, if you're someone who loves connecting with other people in the profession, then you look forward to conferences, right? And there we were, everybody was locked down. So I put on a conference for 2 days. I think I had about 200 or 220 people on Zoom, which was also new back then.
Great. Yeah. Those good old days.
Skype, I think, was the thing before. Anyway, this was Zoom. And there was a lot of interest in this idea of bringing sort of the adjacent professions around us into a conversation with us about leadership and about culture and about our own resilience. So I'm doing it again, some different faculty, not all different faculty, in person in Jersey City at a hotel in Jersey City. That's actually the view from the hotel looking at New York City. We're going to have 2 half days, and the night in between, we're going to do a reception. In that reception, Allison Taylor, who is one of the books, she wrote one of the books, Higher Ground. And
she's on next week. She's coming on Ethicsverse next week. Yeah.
She's a dear friend and just, I think, a brilliant shining star in our profession. She's going to talk a little about her book, and we're going to celebrate her book at that reception. And then the next day, I've got Ron Carucci kicking us off. Ron's book, To Be Honest, was also on that first page. Yep. He's been really masterful in bringing his expertise about strategy and collaboration to our profession in lots of different ways, but he's going to do a session. And then I'm also going to do some of what we're talking about today with a deeper dive into how to manage stress, how to avoid the moral distress that can happen in our profession. So I hope you'll join us. If you go to the Resility website, right on the landing page, you can click on the link that I think it might say our faculty. Did I try showing that? Let's see if I can do that. Let's see, share. There are a few other people in Resility who are going to be speaking, as well as a couple of other outside speakers. So here we go. So come on, share. There it is. So there's Ron, there's Allison, there's me. Kim Meninger, who's a fabulous leadership coach. Her expertise is in imposter syndrome, actually. Marin.
Oh, I'm great at that.
Yeah.
I'm great at imposter syndrome.
No, I think that you didn't get that gene at birth. That one. No.
I just hide it well.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Marin and Shalini and Tammy are all colleagues of mine in Resility. Shalini, like me, is a compliance lawyer turned consultant. Marin and Tammy have expertise in psychology. Tammy particularly is a coach, a career coach. So by bringing their expertise to what we're doing in this profession, we can be more effective in these things I'm calling strategic leadership and resilience. So
yeah, you get no bonus points. Like we say all the time, you get no bonus points for reinventing the wheel. And so much of the potential value, so much of the potential impact we can have can come from just engaging with other people in this profession. It really is our greatest asset.
Yeah, and, absolutely. Yeah. That's why I love conferences. I think we are a very collaborative profession. We support each other, we help each other, particularly if, and this is something we should really talk about as well. If you're finding that you're in a job where you just cannot be effective, it's probably better to leave. It's not about you. It's about not having the champions in the organization usually, and beating ourselves over the head or running into brick walls over and over and over again. It is really something that can lead to burnout. And so, let's talk about what are the things that make us effective. And the only one I'm going to talk about today is resilience. But this is a diagram. I think I made it in 2004 when I first started consulting. And I did it because I was coaching a new chief compliance officer. And she had come from the legal department, as many people did back then, and was really good at reacting to crises, doing investigations. I helped her build a program. But those two things, if you look at sort of like 2 o'clock, 12 o'clock there, those are the two things we tend to focus on, or certainly have focused on for the last 20 or 25 years, a lot in conferences and webinars. And I'm not so sure we've focused enough on the other three things. So engaging champions and embedding our programs in the business, integrating what we do into the way the business runs is what makes our program effective. And then leading and managing teams. I mean, I'm giggling only because, just because you're a great lawyer doesn't mean you can manage anybody. And so those skills, those leadership skills are important. And then finally, the thing we're going to talk about today is the importance of leading ourselves first. So, and I can give you, put on your own oxygen mask first. Don't try to drive a car with an empty gas tank, right? All those things are part of leading ourselves, just like, continuing education is part of leading ourselves. So let's dive into what that means. Committing time like you are right now to, learning and developing yourself, developing your skills is an important part of leading ourselves. But as I said before, I really want to help people in this profession not just survive, but thrive and flourish. Because, let's face it, none of us have gone into this profession to get rich. And we're here because we have a sense of purpose. We want to help our colleagues, our organizations see the value of doing the right thing. But that is sometimes an uphill battle. And so making sure that we've got a full gas tank in all of these ways, physically, emotionally, with the relationships in the company and outside the company, we can have more energy for our career and for being effective in what we do. The concept of work-life balance, I think, is a misnomer. It's not a seesaw. It's not I'm working and then I'm living. We're working while we're living. And I prefer to use the term equilibrium and to think about, if you put the board that's on the left, if you were looking down, if your feet were on that board, how do you find in sort of 3 dimensions, how do you find equilibrium if that board is sitting on a ball? See, I think that's really more accurate a visual than a seesaw.
Yeah. Well, there's 360 degrees that you can come out of balance. That's the point, not just 1 degree. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And the thing on the left there is, if that's who we are physically, emotionally, intellectually, and socially, we can't just put all our energy into the professional slice of that pie because we'll be neglecting the other things, right? So if we're standing on that board over there and juggling all of our different roles that we've got over there, or wearing many different hats, how do we manage our energy so that we can do everything with the kind of quality and commitment that we want? So
real quick, Deb. So hey Wendy, how's it going? So Wendy had a great question. Someone in the chat, Margarita. Hey Margarita. Margarita said self-investment is key, and Wendy said self-investment is also difficult. How do you flip that sort of mindset and switch from looking at it and thinking about it like an expense to thinking about it as an investment in yourself, especially when you're investing money and not just time? What a great question. Because so much of it is about that kind of mindset. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I'll say the bottom bullet point here, the idea of being present in the moment, being mindful, setting up routines that help you invest in yourself, feels more like investment than it feels like spending. When we have to spend on our well-being, it's because we're getting close to something disabling. But if we think about it as just part of our daily routine, I like to advise my coaching clients to have a morning routine that replenishes their energy. I learned to meditate using the 10% Happier app about, 5 or 6 years ago. I do not look at anything on my phone. Well, that's not true. I look at my text messages because I'm a mommy, so, and a grandma. So yeah, I look at that. But I start with a meditation. Sometimes I can only do it for, 3 minutes, but it's take a breath, put yesterday behind me, be open to today. And then I take a walk. I'm fortunate enough to have moved here to the Jersey Shore about 5 years ago. So my walks, some of you know who connect with me online, I walk at sunrise. So even in the summer, which is kind of painful. But then I'm ready to look at my email. And there are other things I'll talk about, strategies that I call short-term and long-term that we can get into. Before we do that, I'd like to know how all of you are feeling. If you use your smartphone and on that QR code, it will take you to a Mentimeter question. Let's make sure I've got that ready to go. Yep, I should. How are you feeling? This is something that I always like to ask at the beginning of a workshop. Physically, intellectually, emotionally, how are you feeling? Just a word. And what we're going to see is a word cloud. This is an important thing to do at the beginning of a meeting. Your team. How's your team feeling? So are you able to do that? I just want to make sure. Is it working for you? Try it for me.
Me?
Yeah.
There's Ethicsverse is a no phone zone for me.
Oh, good.
I'm
okay.
just kidding. So just kidding. I'm just being annoying. I'm just joking.
Well, if you're in a no phone zone, anybody listening here, you can also go, see the slide says, go to menti.com and there's a code. I think we might also be putting, there's a URL you can click on, but I think menti.com with that code is probably the easiest. Let me share the screen because we're getting a pretty cool word cloud right now. see. Yeah. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, looks like it's loading right now. Cool.
So I'll tell you, I ask this question at the beginning of every workshop I do. When I speak at conferences, actually, I usually do this. And in the, I guess, 3 or 4 years that I've been doing it, the word in the middle, because we all know with a word cloud, what you all are typing is showing up there, right? The word in the middle in our profession is always something like tired, exhausted, drained, overwhelmed, stressed. That's who we are. That's what's happening to us. So when you think about,
I mean, look at that. It's
right?
Like those main 3 or 4 words are just like there constant. That's crazy.
Right. And so the things that you're feeling intellectually and emotionally that are there, happy, good, engaged, focused, stimulated, energized, those are wonderful for doing our work. But if we are physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, tired, exhausted, stressed, we can't possibly do our work with our full self, our full brain. So, let's talk about what that means. And oh, by the way, I'll be glad to, I'll share the results. I know you send this out after the, right? After the,
okay. Yeah, for those who ask really nicely, we send it.
Good. So I'll give you those. We'll put them in the deck so that people can see.
So listen to this from Eugenia. Hey, Eugenia. She said, I think this is a particularly great topic for all of us former lawyers, particularly those of us who came up in the profession when self-awareness and self-care were seen as indulgent, self-centered, and recipes for exiting the profession early on. So like we carry this baggage with us, right? Like we are raised by parents and we inherit their tendencies, and we come up in a certain profession and those things end up kind of crafting and becoming sort of foundational characteristics for how we do work, even if we change professions. And so I think this is a really important point, because any of this resilient stuff that we're talking about, it's going to start with that sort of turning inward and that self-reflection to kind of deconstruct and say, like, where am I which side of this, this balance thing am I like putting too much effort on? And like sometimes at the root of that is some kind of a like negative self-talk or something you've been told or something you've inherited or something that you've sort of emulated to now where it becomes like an instinct,
Exactly. Coming up as a lawyer myself, I was an environmental lawyer because I had been an environmental engineer first. And then, that was sort of the obvious practice area to go into. Leaving your emotions at the door was something we were told in the, late 80s, early 90s in law firm land. And, they usually meant we're not going to scream at each other, but it also meant whatever's going on at home, leave it there, leave it in the parking lot, leave it in the car, whatever. Somebody actually said that to me, a partner, not one I was working for, but saw me teary-eyed. I had given birth to our twins. Our second and third children are twins. They're now 32. And I was a little weepy because I only had, back in those days, I had 6 weeks of maternity leave, 2 of which I'd used before I gave birth to them. Leaving my emotions at the door was just not possible. And that's when I started looking for an in-house job. And I had a wonderful run, 10 years in AT&T Lucent Avaya, in a law department that would never have said that. In fact, that law department said, bring your whole self to work. So when we say that, though, we're not just asking people to bring their brain, right? Their rational thought. We're asking them to bring their whole self. So whatever was in that word cloud, that's all coming in the door. These other 2 bullet points are just to remind us that our emotions are the huge part of what's going on inside us. The emotions are the elephant. This is a Jonathan Haidt. If you know Jonathan, actually he works with Allison. The rider is our rational mind. The elephant is our emotional self. We are not going to steer that elephant if we don't understand what's going on with the elephant. So getting our arms around our emotions, understanding them, listening to what they're teaching us is how we can make better decisions. We're not thinking machines that feel. We are feeling machines that think. I love that quote.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
This bring your whole self to work thing, people do that regardless of whether the company says to do that or not. This is not, most of the people, probably everybody on this call is not like working in a machine shop, pressing a button and spitting out widgets. It's creative work. If it's creative work and there's that room for creativity, well, then naturally we are putting ourselves into our work. So this old framework of having these like divisions in silos of our life, it doesn't, perhaps it works that way in sort of the Industrial Revolution. I doubt it did. It definitely doesn't work that way when like people are working from home and these sort of like walls between these sections of our lives have all but dissolved. So like we have to figure out ways to like ride this elephant and make sure that elephant is fed, or we're just going to be kind of holding on for dear life,
Exactly.
I got a quick question for you from Candy. So Candy says, hey, Candy, I'm an HR Department of One compliance leader and HR leader for 5 startup EINs in an industry that is kind of, different, LOL. I feel like burnout is constantly biting at my ankles. I love my company and I love what I do, but it definitely can get overwhelming, especially since I'm the only one that can answer those kinds of questions. Could it be, this could be an interesting talking point about how smaller teams can cope with these issues. This is a really, this could be a whole webinar, this particular question, but I'd love for you to talk about it, and perhaps we can kind of, let's hear what you say.
Okay. So first of all, and I think this is related, if we understand that emotions are powerful forces, then this quote from Siegel Barstead, who's was a Harvard professor, she wrote a lot about emotional culture. Look at all of the things that our emotions can do at work, right? So if we understand that burnout is an occupational hazard, here, I'm just let me give you I'll leave the stats up for a sec. I like to say that burnout is an occupational hazard. It's not a failure of character. It's not a lack of grit. It's about poor management in the organization. So if you think about a team, particularly if you're a small office, 2 people, 3 people, even 1 person, looking at how to divide the work and how to support each other is how we can achieve what we need to achieve, right? Not I'm having a good day, you're having a bad day, too bad. But how can we help each other? And that's why asking about emotions, how are you doing today, and actually waiting for an answer is important. I like when I work with teams, compliance teams, I use Gallup Strength Finder so that we know what the relative strengths are in the team. And then we can kind of lean on each other when we think about how to roll out the program or deal with whatever, issues, investigations, whatever. By looking at the collective strengths, we can help each other when somebody's not feeling up to it or feels like something's a struggle. Well, there might be somebody else on the team who has a strength in whatever area you're struggling in. Hopefully that helps. Let's look at burnout. These statistics, I think, are staggering. Gallup does a state of the workplace, global workplace report every year. And in their most recent, they look, of course, I think probably people know, they're the ones who started doing employee engagement surveys back in the, 80s, I think. Their surveys have touched millions of people. And what they're finding is that employees who are disengaged are feeling twice the stress as employees who are engaged. So, and
isn't that interesting?
Isn't
that interesting? Yeah.
And
our lives.
Engagement. Go ahead.
Yeah. Our lives are a function of what we're fixating on. And when you're stressed, how can you see anything beyond what's right in front of you? You know what I'm saying? So it has this sort of compounding effect that leads to burnout way faster. And that engagement thing seems to be this sort of focal point.
Exactly. Engaged employees are connecting usually to the purpose of the team, the organization. They feel like what they're doing matters, and they feel like their contribution, their opinion matters. And this is the connection for us to the culture things we work on, right? Employees who are engaged and feel safe to share what they're thinking about are going to share ideas. They're going to share innovative changes that can be made. And selfishly for us, they're going to raise issues without fearing retaliation. So I just thought that was a really important point. If there's a lot of burnout and stress in your organization, we're not going to get people to speak up.
And
This last point about in the US, 24% feel that their organization cares about their well-being. Look at the number from pre-COVID, right? Or at the beginning of COVID, 49%. So, and actually one of the articles that I co-wrote with Marin that I showed you was about what we call care washing. So, saying you care, but then not really caring, not really doing, where your words don't meet your actions, that's undermining the well-being of employees.
So if you think, I think it's really helpful, now that we're living in this sort of knowledge work economy where we are our work, to like reference back and like make a comparison to the Industrial Revolution economy or like a manufacturing setting. And like in any manufacturing organization, there is downtime, right? Like they have system downtime where they're doing repairs and maintenance, and that like a machine that has had no, repairs and maintenance, no proper maintenance on it, that doesn't work, doesn't mean that that's a piece of garbage machine. That means that was not taken care of. And that's not a failure of the machine. That's not a failure of anything, to your point, other than like the manager of that asset. And so whether that's manager in a company or it's the manager of yourself, of your own asset, we have to do that, do those kind of standard repairs and maintenance if we're going to be able to keep running. No machine, no human can run 24/7 for 20 years carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. And, I love sessions like this because like the chat is blowing up. This is a very difficult profession that we're in. We're not in it to make money. We're in it to make a difference. We're in it to help people. We, by our nature, tend to like put ourselves behind the needs of other folks. And because of that, it's so easy to just be like, at like every beck and call of everybody else. And it can be very lonely because most of us are walking hat racks. Sessions like this, when we can come together, or conferences like you're putting on, those are such a great shot in the arm because we can remember that like, okay, I'm not in this alone. Like seeing some of the words that I typed on that word cloud, I was like, okay, this is not like there's something wrong with me. There's it's just a natural sort of extension of like what we do every day. You know what I mean?
Right. I saw I saw a comment in the chat fly by earlier. Someone who said that the word cloud exercise was really valuable to her because she could see she wasn't alone. And that's music to my ears. That's why I do what I do. I felt really alone when I burned out. And we don't have enough time for me to tell my whole story. But knowing that this is an occupational hazard, and not just for us, but I mean, here, the World Health Organization said it. So, I mean, I think I said it better, but they're saying that, right? I think I can do it in a sentence and they, have however many words that is. But the idea that it's about how we're managed, right? It's about how the workload and the timelines and the deadlines are managed that really matters. The U.S. Surgeon General got on board once we were into COVID and wrote this really great guidance document about workplace mental health and well-being. I highly recommend it. The link is there at the bottom. And this is a page out of my my Presence in Chaos book. That's my both of my dogs there. But the idea that we have to burn out in order to succeed is ridiculous. And yet we've normalized it.
And the thought that we're only successful when we're stressed, like stress as an indicator of like me being successful, busy, whatever. Stress is not an indicator of anything other than you being stressed. You know what I'm saying? It's not necessarily correlated with successfulness or impact or effectiveness.
Right. And that, that busyness meter doesn't necessarily mean we're being productive.
Exactly.
In what we're doing, right?
Exactly. Great point. Yep.
Okay. Burnout. So burnout has lots of different root causes. The reason I have that rubber band picture there is, well, partly because, I'm an engineer. And I wanted to talk about meeting our elastic limit. And of course, I don't have a rubber band here today to do this with you. But everybody knows, I think, that if you stretch and stretch and stretch a rubber band, eventually you start seeing it fray and it doesn't go back to its original size and shape, right? And so when you pull it too hard, eventually you go beyond its elastic limit. And so what I'm talking about when I'm talking about equilibrium and resilience is the idea that we need to let our rubber band come back right? To sort of restore ourselves in order to stretch again for whatever the next demand is. Being able to identify red flags for us, for our teammates, for people we work with, for people in our family is, I think, a really important skill set. So I wanted to talk about this framework, the 12 stages of burnout, because I think that some of these stages might resonate for some of you. We all drive ourselves. We are hard working people. And stress can be a motivator, but chronic stress is not healthy, right? So when we're stressed because there's a deadline, there's like a dopamine hit, the adrenaline rushes, like, wow, I've got this thing and I'm almost done. And then when you finish it, it feels great. That's good. But then we need time to kind of back down and let systems reset, right? And if we don't, then we start sliding down this hill. So if we're constantly on to the next thing, if we're multitasking, which, by the way, is not a human skill that we should be honing, our brain can only focus on one thing at a time. So when we're multitasking, we're really not giving our best self to the things that we're doing. Good luck, because, with the advent of mobile phones, we've kind of normalized the idea that we should multitask, but we shouldn't. So when you go ahead,
I'm sorry. Oh, I got a couple of really good questions here, and I just think your perspective would help a lot if you don't mind me asking them.
Yeah,
so burnout's definitely an occupational hazard. This is from Monique. Hey, Monique, how do we get executive leadership to view it that way? To view burnout as this occupational hazard,
Yes. Well, the 3 slides that are in this deck, I think, are a starting point for the conversation. So the Gallup numbers about burnout, and there's tons of other data points out there to use, but pointing to the World Health Organization, they're the ones who decide when there's a disease, when there's an epidemic, for them to have,
good point,
right? So for them to have identified workplace burnout as an occupational phenomenon that's like, when somebody, it's like carpal tunnel is an occupational phenomenon, right? When we're typing wrong and we have, improper chairs and we get back problems, that's the kind of stuff when we're talking about occupational health and safety that we're talking about. Here we've got a mental health issue that I think leaders can get their arms around if we give them some data, right? That's number
smart.
The sort of the business case, now I'm stepping into your territory, Nick. The business case for investing in workplace mental health is, let's take a look at our turnover rate. Let's take a look at our disability insurance.
How about our engagement rate?
Exactly. So, and by the way, you can do a culture assessment. You can do, this is something that Marn and I are certified in now, is emotional culture. Taking the temperature of the culture anonymously, sort of an extended version of that word cloud, is going to give them the insight that all of you just got by knowing you're not alone in some of the feelings that were in those big words. And I think, when I talk to a CEO, first thing I ask them is how they're feeling. So
they're probably burnt out too. Okay. Everyone's burnt out. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Although, some CEOs have support systems because they can afford them that regular employees don't have. So that's another point to sort of air with them. I want to just sort of come down this road a little bit. I won't dive into each one given the time we're working with, but this is something that we will dive more deeply into in the retreat. The idea that burnout sort of is a snowball. It starts as stress, and then some of these other things start happening, right? You neglect your personal care. You start altering, you start talking yourself into the fact that it's okay to work 14 hours and not be there to put your kids to bed because, we need the paycheck. We have a big mortgage, whatever it is, right? And then you start sort of deflecting and displacing conflict. I worked for someone once who was having trouble at home and would come into the office and yell at all of us when at least somebody gave us the insight that he was having trouble with his wife. Okay, that's maybe because he was trying to do too much, whatever it was. If you're angry about that and you're taking it out over here, that can be a red flag for burnout. When you kind of come down the hill a bit, there's a level of shame that can attach to feeling like you're not getting things done or you're missing deadlines. And instead of asking for help, if you keep pushing yourself, you're going to fall farther down the hill. And I can tell you that because it happened to me. This idea of feeling alone and empty and eventually getting to the point of depression. For me, I hit mental and physical collapse, not once, but twice in my career. And I'll tell you that part of what was burning me out was trying to fix a lawyer I worked for who said we were doing the right thing, but wasn't and wouldn't, and pushed back when I recommended we need to be doing this or we need to be doing that. You know, we're having issues that need attention. We don't want them to snowball. And when we think we're going to change someone and we try and try and try, that's exhausting. So that was one time. Another time, it was because I was trying to make up for that by taking on too much. For a while, about almost like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I took on 2 part-time jobs as a GC and chief compliance officer of 2 chemical companies, privately owned. Like, that's ridiculous. Those aren't part-time jobs. Those are 2 full-time jobs, right? And when those 2 contracts
ended, squeeze in a little extra kind of compliance work in there, huh?
Right? So when those 2 jobs ended, I literally could not get out of bed. I could not get out of bed. And I remember saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I always know what to do. So there's the red flag for me, right? I'm my fuel tanks on every one of those 4 domains of equilibrium, empty. So what I'd like to do before we go into some of the strategies for coming back up that hill is just see how you're feeling. You know, see if any of those 12 stages resonate for you. Choose one. I think maybe I can tell you this without skewing what you answer. I've done this more than 10 times now with compliance audiences, at conferences, in client engagements, and the results are pretty startling. I'll tell you, are you able to, let's take a look.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah. The idea that so many of us get pretty far down that hill and still deliver is not a badge of honor. It's a flag that should say, we need more resources. We need more support. We need to be able to lean on each other if we can't get that support in-house. And then to me, it also means I should have left the job I described instead of constantly trying to change someone who wasn't getting it, because that person was the block between me and the rest of the C-suite.
But
right?
There's also this sort of negative connotation attached to like quitting. And like, I don't want to be a quitter, you know, like I try to teach my kids, like, don't give up. But at some level, I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because like, it's insane to keep smashing your head against a wall and just, you know what I'm saying? Like it's wild. And so it's hard.
And I'll tell you
go ahead.
For me, the shame that attached for me to the idea that I was so burned out, I couldn't do my job.
You feel like kind of a loser, you know? I mean, that's how I felt, you know?
Right. What do I do with that? And, you know, my parents worked hard to they were first generation college. My father's first generation American, like working hard and not giving up. That was, you know, bred into us. And so the idea that I failed was that there was so much shame in that, that it really took me a while to get past it. So here, let's look at, you're seeing the results, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at here's denial of issues is sort of halfway, right? Do you see where it is down there at the bottom of the pie?
Yeah.
And then as we go around, like, look at how many of us are
What's that
this
big
far
one?
down the hill.
What's that one?
So inner emptiness, depression, mental and physical collapse. I feel you. And please know, hopefully, you know, that by seeing these results, you know, you're not alone. You know, you're not alone. And, you know, had I known that years ago when this happened to me, I probably would have recovered a lot faster because I would have asked for help a lot faster.
You know, if you look at behavioral psychology and you look at personality types, there's a really high correlation between high conscientious people, which is like everybody who's on this call, and like perfectionnism. And that is also kind of correlated with like birth order, like, you know, oldest tend to have a higher level of conscientiousness. And so I am a recovering perfectionist, I think. But like perfectionism is so difficult because like it's an unattainable carrot. You know what I'm saying? It's like a carrot that like is always a certain distance away. You can never really achieve it. And perfectionists, in my experience, have like a lot of their fuel toward that perfection is like this sort of self-stress, this self-imposed, you know, pressure. You know what I'm saying? And like we have to remember
our expectations are up here for ourselves and maybe not for anybody else.
But, you know, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to balance because like you're never going to have excellence without high expectations, but you also can't have high expectations without patience. And that patience is a time thing, and that's a noise thing, and that's a volatility thing, and that's a sort of lack of true perfectionism or true perfection type of a thing. And so I think a perfectionist challenge is like figuring out which perfection, or, you know, which items need the perfectionism switch on or off for, because you can't be perfect at everything, and you can't continue to put negative pressure on yourself. Like, look, we all want to climb to that next summit for sure, but we have to, and that sort of like that drive to climb higher is what got us to where we're at, right? Like a lot of us have a lot of positive feedback loops of these types of tendencies that have generated success for us. So it's noble to continue to climb, but we have to remember that anytime you're climbing a mountain, that's difficult. And also it's not weak to look back and notice, oh my gosh, look how much progress I've made. And understand that we're never going to get to this top, the top of this mountain of perfection or impact or excellence that we're climbing. But we have just decided that we want to pursue excellence for the sake of it, not for the stress relief of it. And I think when we're running from stress, we will tend to stay in stress. When we're running to something that we think is important, I feel like the stress is a little bit less, the pressure is a little bit more positive, and we can sort of achieve that above the line a little bit better.
Right. Exactly right. This next question that people are answering focuses a lot on some of the things you've just talked about. Are you seeing the results?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I've done this, 10 or 12 times, the ones that come out the highest are coming out the highest here. Workload, juggling commitments, lack of trust in senior leadership, self-expectations and perfectionism, I believe, is the highest. Is it here? Yes. Okay. So that's who we are, a lot of us. And so one of the things that we need to shine a light on is that perfection is rarely possible, but excellence usually is. And so one of the things we're going to talk about at the summit is the difference between striving for perfection and striving for excellence. For any of you who are familiar with quality management systems and the idea of continual improvement, setting your North Star on excellence is what drives continual improvement. I'm doing my best. I'm making progress. I'm learning from mistakes, or, we tried something, it didn't work. That's okay. We got a step ahead, or we got 2 steps ahead and 1 step back, but we're going to keep going. And that's what excellence is versus perfection. let's jump ahead because I want to touch on, we have 10 minutes and we want to make sure we have time for there's some great questions I'm seeing in the chat.
Yeah, there are.
The idea of identifying what you just did with the hill, right? That's enormous. And also taking stock in the fact that you're not alone in being halfway down the hill or farther. That's also enormous. So what do we do about it? And the solutions, the strategies that I talk about fall into these three categories: first aid, short-term, and long-term. I love this quote from Anne Lamott, and it's just about unplugging, right? When we reset a computer, or when, we just turn everything off and rest and relax, we really will work better if we do that. First aid, I would say, of some of the obvious ones are nutrition and hydration, rest, movement, even just getting out and taking a walk, changing your focus, look out the window, look at the sky. I'm lucky enough to be able to walk a mile and look at the horizon on the ocean, right? And that's rare for people. But just taking your eyes off of this screen and looking over there, looking over here, there are lots of neuroscience things I could tell you if we had more time, but giving both sides of our brain a chance to engage is also really helpful first aid. That's why this book was one of the things, besides the meditation, one of the things that saved me. This is a book of my photographs, right? And quotes. And what I did to get myself out of bed way back then, 2017 or 18, was, okay, I need to complete something today. I'm going to take a picture and put a quote on it and share it with my friends. Did that for a week or two. One of my friends said, you should put this in Facebook. That was a little scary, but okay, I did that. Then another friend said, you have a big LinkedIn following, you should put it there. And that felt I was a little queasy about that because, leave your emotions at the door, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was BS, because once I started posting in LinkedIn, there were so many people who loved it, commented. When I remember times when I didn't do it as early as I used to do it, and people would say, hey, where's your, direct message me or text me, where's the post? Especially people who knew what I was going through. So after doing it for 2 years, one of my friends said, you should make a book out of that, because I think people would really like it. And so I did. And there's a space for writing things at the bottom. Anybody who keeps a gratitude journal, right? That's another really good way. That's beyond first aid. That's a short-term, long-term strategy.
I think this is good, what I'm about to say. Okay. We are not our body. I usually think what I'm going to say is good. Okay. We are not our body. We are not our mind. We have a body and we have a mind, and it's on us to take care of those kinds of things. And if we can view our mind and view our body as tools, as machines that we have to go through and move through the world, well, then we shouldn't feel guilty in doing maintenance on those things. Kind of back to Wendy's question from before, Is that a price or is that a cost? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
You pay the price for a bright smile after you go to the dentist. You pay that cost one time. So we have to think about we have to take care of these major assets that we have, one being our mind, one being our body, because those two things together is what are what we need in order to do anything in the world, to have any kind of impact in this physical reality we're in.
That's right. And to stick with the dental example, the cleaning twice a year is an important part of the maintenance, but brushing and flossing every day is our job, right? And if we don't do that, we're going to be visiting the dentist for something way beyond a cleaning. So this diagram, hopefully, helps us focus on what's in our control that we can get our arms around, right? When we're stressed, stepping back and saying, okay, what do I have control of? That's, if I'm upset, if I'm angry, if I'm frustrated, what's within my control or my sphere of influence, what's outside my control. Yes. This is a Stephen Covey 7 Habits thing that I love. When it's outside our control, we have to let it go. I won't sing, but let it go, because you balancing your energy and focusing on the things that are within your control or your influence, that's where the investment really matters.
I think all stress and burnout comes from type 1 errors around this graph. Type 1 error is a false positive. So when you think that you have more influence than you do, or you think you have more control than you do, then that's where the stress comes from. Truly, that, if this is a sphere, or if there's like a sphere around me of like what's actually in my control, it's probably like against my skin, because I can't control the people around me. I can perhaps influence them maybe, but like the amount of things that are outside of my control are like exponentially bigger than what I think is outside of my control. You know what I'm saying?
I've absolutely. I've got some strategies in here for the short-term solutions. The thing I wanted to point out about emotions, if we go back to how we're feeling, is that our emotions are telling us something. One of my favorite meditation teachers on the 10% Happier app, and by the way, if anybody would like to try that, when you have a subscription, you can give free 30-day membership. So email me, text me, LinkedIn message me, whatever, and I'll give you that link and you can try it. But the guy I'm about to tell you about says that this meditation is called Welcome to the Party. And he says that when you slow down enough, and the breathing exercise that I would do if we have more time can help you do that. But if you slow down enough to say, whoa, why am I feeling that? He says, anger, welcome to the party. Sit down at the table. What is it you're trying to tell me, right? Like creating the space between the trigger and your reaction to it is what mindfulness and meditation can help you do. If you can name it, so this is Susan David, who's great. If you're not following her, she's terrific to follow. She has a great book, Emotional Agility. Name it, accept it, step out of it, and then she would say, tame it. Name it to tame it. So I don't have to act on my anger. My anger might be telling me that I'm disappointed, frustrated, lonely, abandoned, right? What are those feelings telling us? And then what's in our control, what's in our influence, what's out of our control, right? The long-term strategies have to do with some of the things that I'm talking about. I also really believe in a daily walk. Thank goodness for Apple Watches and checking how many steps we've walked. I highly recommend making sure you take all your vacation days and making sure that the people on your team are taking their vacation days. If you manage others, understand that sometimes what's outside their control and their sphere of influence might be in yours. So this is where psychological safety matters too, right? Not just for us and our team, but for the CEO and the people who report to her or him. I had a woman in the Women in Compliance Summit that we were at together, Nick, in Atlanta. I had a woman who raised this concern, chief compliance officer who works for the CEO. She said, I could never have that conversation with my CEO. Well, if we can't at that level, how do we expect anybody in the organization to, right? So this is, I think, this slide is a very important message for managers if you manage people. Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, I highly recommend. A lot of what I've learned about feelings and emotions. It's a great book. And then there are things at the team and organizational level that we can do. When I was in-house, I had no meeting Fridays. We had lunch together that I paid for, and we just talked about what was going on. What I do now is I block my Monday mornings. No calls, no Zoom meetings, nothing. My Mondays are for me to make sure I've reset and I'm prepared for the week ahead. Now, I own my business. I can do that. Not everybody can do that. But you can put things in your calendar so that people can't just schedule you into things. Just saying. And the other thing is making sure at the beginning of the year that everybody schedules their vacations. You can always change it later, but there's nothing worse than getting to Thanksgiving or the Christmas week and somebody's still got 3 weeks left or 2 weeks left and everybody wants to go out at the same time. That's just a disaster, right? And then finally, there are some, and sorry, I'm flying through these. I want you to see what's here so that when you get the slides, you'll know there's this stuff in the back. There are lots of things managers and leaders can do, and having the conversations with your manager helps them talk to their peers about why these things are important. We can't boil the ocean. It's,
right.
I like to say it's one spaghetti pot at a time, whether we're doing risk management or we're talking about emotional culture. And so if you get a champion who gets this, that's one spaghetti pot. And then they can help you convince others to do the same, because they're going to be a much better advocate with their peers probably than we are.
So I want to just, as we're wrapping up, one more round of applause for Deb. I hope you guys can join her in New Jersey in November or September. I hope you guys enjoyed this. As we're wrapping up, I just want to, I was kind of struck with this, that like life is way closer to like horseshoes and hand grenades than it is like brain surgery. And so like not everything can be perfect. Like you mess up something in brain surgery, you're done. Life is more like baseball. Like you're going to strike out a couple of times and you can still make it to the Hall of Fame. And so like we can never move through life with grace. We can never have the impact that we could potentially have and be an actual success, right? Unless we have a little bit of grace for ourselves. We have to cut ourselves a little bit of slack, and we have to recognize that like we have come a long way. We're still alive, right? Like every day of our life has been a success because we're still living, right? So we have a bunch of successes that we can look back on, and if we can find some solace in that or some confidence in that, and like remind ourselves that it's not all falling apart, that there are good things to fixate on, and that healthy, establishing boundaries, personal or at work, those are all appropriate things. This is a hard job. This is a hard industry we're in. It's tough to juggle all of this stuff as those walls between work and home and stuff melt. Somebody in the chat said, since work from home, my tendency for burnout is even worse. We have to take a moment to tune into the machines that we have, the assets that we have, and make sure that like those things are running right, and take our own temperature. So this was a phenomenal conversation. I wish this could have been 2 hours. Deb, love you so much. Hope you guys can come next week. Next week we have Allison Taylor. If you don't know her, buckle up. It's going to be phenomenal. But follow Deb on LinkedIn. Share our posts so we can get some more people here. Invite folks from your team. Invite your friends if you like it. And again, please let us know how we can make this more valuable. Hope to see you all next week. Love your work. Take it easy.
Thanks so much.